Hello, crafty friends! It's Alicia, here with a project for Tailored Expressions. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make a set of 4 quick and easy fall thank you cards. Featured on today's cards are the Awesome Autumn Layering Stencil with Coordinating Cutting Plate and the Happy Harvest Sentiment and Die Set. I will also be using the A2 Layer Stacklets, Knock on Wood Background Stamp, A2 Postage Stamp Stacklets, and, for some added decoration, gold glitter drops. For cardstock, I got out Jalapeno, Blue Raspberry, Honey, Blueberry, and Buttercream frosting. I got out those same in inks, except I replaced buttercream frosting with toffee and chocolate truffle. I also grabbed blending brushes in coordinating colors. To help with crisp, clean stamping, I'll be using the TE Exclusive Teal Misty and Just Press tool. And finally, I'll be using a variety of adhesives to hold everything together. Let's get crafty! I'm going to get started with the stenciling. For this, I'll be using 4 colored inks for the leaves, and for the veins on the leaves and the acorns, I'll be using the browns. I pre-cut some pieces of the buttercream frosting to 3 inches by 6 inches to stencil onto. I will be using the toffee ink for the bottom of the acorns, and because I only need 4 total, this first piece of cardstock is the only one I will blend these onto. To help hold the piece in place, I added some tape runner to the back, and then I'm going to put it to the left of that big 6x6 square on the pre-printed placemat. The left half of the stencil will be aligned over the piece of buttercream frosting, and I held it in place with a piece of painter's tape. Now, because I don't want any toffee ink up on my leaves, I did cover some of that up with Post-it removable labeling tape, and then I did my ink blending with the toffee. I just keep layering the ink until I like the coverage, and then when that was done, because I'm going to go ahead and stencil the leaves, I covered the acorn bottom up with the labeling tape. For this first set of leaves, I will be using honey ink and blending just like with the acorn bottoms until I like the coverage. Now, if you just wanted to stencil one sheet, you could use bitty blender brushes and do each leaf separately in the colors of your choice. Before I move on to the next color, I did take this off camera and cleaned it very well. And then for the second set of leaves, I'll be using the same process with blue raspberry, but for this one I don't have to worry about covering up those acorn bottoms because I don't need any more. Once I had my blue raspberry leaves, I used the same process with the blueberry and jalapeno inks. I cleaned that stencil one last time, and now to get the veins on the leaves and the acorn top, I'm going to move my stencil so the right half is now over the buttercream frosting piece, which I have moved over to the right half of that 6x6 square. I will be using chocolate truffle ink for all of the stenciling of the right half, and on this one I don't have to clean it between pieces of buttercream frosting since it's the same ink. Once the first piece had the chocolate truffle added, I removed only the piece of buttercream frosting and I left the stencil in place this time. That way all I have to do is flip it back down and start the remaining stenciling. I did the same until all 4 pieces had their veins and on this final one had the acorn tops. While those dried for a bit, I did some die cutting. I used the largest A2 postage stacklet die and cut 4 panels from honey cardstock. And then, using the 4th from largest A2 layer stacklets die, I cut 2 pieces from honey, 2 pieces from blue raspberry, and 2 from blueberry. For a little bit of faux texture and to go with the woodsy feel, I got out the Knock on Wood background stamp, and I'm going to be doing some tone-on-tone stamping onto the honey, blue raspberry, and blueberry pieces. To get started, I'm going to go with the lightest ink, so the honey, and to prepare this, I placed the first piece down and I remembered exactly which square I put it in, and then I'm going to place the background stamp face down on top of that. I did try to place it so it was in the lower left-hand corner, so when I go to ink up the stamp, I don't necessarily have to do the whole thing. I just love the little bit of added texture background stamps add. Let me know your favorite way to add texture, whether real or faux, down in the comment section below. Once the honey pieces were stamped, I did the remaining two colors off camera, but I did make sure to clean the stamp very well in between each color. While I have the Misty out, I went ahead and stamped the sentiments. For this, I'm using the Thankful For You stamp, and I used Jalapeno ink on a scrap of buttercream frosting. To set this up, I put the bottom of my piece of cardstock at the 7-inch mark on the Misty ruler, and then I place my sentiment about halfway from top to bottom on that piece. This way, after I have inked up and stamped the first one, I can just move it up and down. I went about an inch each time until I have 4 sentiments on this piece of cardstock. Now you did see me there rub the stamp with my fingers, and that's just because this was a brand new stamp and I like to get some of those manufacturing oils off before I ink it up for the first time. Off camera, I used the coordinating die to cut the sentiments out, and I also cut 4 copies from Jalapeno cardstock. Now I'm going to use my Barely Art liquid glue and adhere these layers together. Now when I do this, after I add the glue to the back, I place it onto its kind of shadow layer just up and to the left a little bit. I start with one end and align it and just make sure the gap is the same on the right and the left. Then I set this under a stamp block to help it dry, and I put together the remaining 3 sets of the sentiment. This is just going to help me later pop this up off the card. It just makes the words a little bit thicker to fit the sticky strips. While those were drying, I used the cutting plate to cut out the leaves. For each color, I'm going to use everything except those 2 down in the bottom center, and later you'll see how I use those to decorate the inside of the cards. Once those were all cut out, I laid them on my work surface in the order that they'll go on the card from left to right. And because I want to mix and match the leaves and colors, I went through and I grabbed the leaves that will go on each card. You'll see I kind of went diagonally from the top left to the bottom right, and then when I ran out of colors, I went back up to that top row to grab the next leaf. I also put 1 acorn with each of the sets. Using that same order, I got together the leaves for the remaining 3 cards. I will show you here on screen if you want to follow along. You might need to slow the video down just a little bit or pause it. My next step is to turn these 2 pieces of stamped honey cardstock into 4 total pieces that are cut at an angle. For this, I brought in a pencil and I made a couple marks. On the left, I made it 2 inches from the bottom, and on the right, I made it 2 inches from the top. Once those little tick marks had been made, I brought in my trimmer and I lined those marks up with the cut line that is already kind of there. When that was in place, I just held it and made the slices. Now I have 4 pieces that look the same when the other 2 are turned around. Once those were all cut, I brought back in my stamped blue pieces and I added one of the angled honey pieces to the bottom of each. Now because they were all cut with that same die, they line up perfectly. And for now, I'm just keeping everything nice and flat and using a tape runner. Now I'm going to add each of those pieces to its postage stamp cut mat. Again, using ATG and just centering it right in the middle. I love the extra detail the stitching gives to these pieces. Once those were all adhered together, it was time to get the leaves added. So I brought in the first set and I laid them out from left to right, right above each piece in the order I wanted them on the cards. I'm going to start by taking the first, third, fifth, and seventh leaves and placing them angled together along that angled cut. Then, to fill in the spaces between the leaves, I brought in the remaining 3 die cuts and I angled those a little bit of an opposite way. Now that I have them in the order I want them, I am using a long piece of Scotch removable tape to hold them all together. Using liquid glue, I'm going to carefully peel back from right to left, not picking up all of the leaves, and I added glue to the back layer, so those first ones that I laid down. You'll notice there I just did a few from the right side, and then I'm going to pull up the left edge and finish adhering those leaves. When those had a little bit of time to dry, I then did the same process, but this time when I pulled the tape up, only that top layer is going to come with it. So I added liquid glue to the back of those just like I did that bottom layer. After that had been done, I then carefully removed the tape and I used that to help put the remaining 3 card fronts together. While I was off camera finishing those, I also took the time to add some foam tape to the back of the sentiments and the acorns. Now, using the pieces that I had left over from before, I am going to add one of these to the inside of the card with some liquid glue. This is just a great way to bring the decoration from the front to the inside. I took some time to figure out where I wanted the rest of the elements on my card to go, and when I had decided, I added the little twiggy piece down with glue to the front, and then I pulled the release paper from the pieces with foam tape, and so I would have a little bit of wiggle time to get it placed just right. I added some liquid glue to the foam tape before I put it on the card. To finish these cards off and to add a little sparkle, I brought in gold glitter drip drops and added 5 to each of the card fronts. I thought this color went very well with the honey cardstock. And here are some close-up looks at the finished cards. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch today's video. If you enjoyed the process, a thumbs up is appreciated. And if you're not already a subscriber, we do hope you'll click on the button below so you're the first to know about our latest videos. To find out more about the products I used today, you can check out the links in the description box or visit the Tailored Expressions online store at tailoredexpressions.com.